in mainland Scotland during the morning. But the sunshine elsewhere prevails. There will be some build-up of cloud during the morning and into the afternoon. Initially just fair weather cloud across the south, and then thicker medium-level cloud coming into the west, turning the sunshine milky by the afternoon across Northern Ireland, West Wales and Cornwall. But where we've got the sunshine and the light winds elsewhere, it's going to feel very pleasant. Temperatures back up to 22 to 24 Celsius. Then into Thursday, a change in conditions once again as a weather front sinks some rain southeastwards across the UK. This tends to weaken as the day goes on, mostly dry towards the southeast. Friday, more changeable weather to the north with some wind and some showery rain, drier and warmer to the south.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Let us take on some of your financial stresses and pay your mortgage or rent for the next 12 months. We want to give you a cash lump sum equivalent to 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, up to an unbelievable £20,000. We'll also boost that by a further £5,000, so you really could have some fun in the coming year. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. While the Blob is publishing poll after poll claiming the British public have a serious case of buyer's remorse after Brexit, a brand new poll released in a few seconds has said the opposite. I'll be discussing this with the man behind the poll itself, Dr. Richard Johnson. The UK's brand new migrant deal with France will be coming into effect immediately, but will it make a jot of difference? As Labour's private school tax grab hits parents up and down the country, I'll be joined by a father who has been at the sharp end of these tax rises. And who needs Ozempic or fatty diets? A new study from University College London has shown that honest home cooking is the best way to shed the pounds. The founder of the charity Bags of Taste, Alicia Weston, will tell us more. State of the Nation starts now. Also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and former Labour advisor, Matthew Lazar. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Sam Francis.
Jacob, thank you, and good evening to you. Just coming up to 2 minutes past 8. Well, the top story, a new one-in, one-out migrant deal between the UK and France has come into force today, aiming to send some Channel migrants back across the water within just days. The EU-backed pilot lets Britain return asylum seekers deemed inadmissible in exchange for taking in others with UK ties. But critics say the scheme is too slow. Just 50 returns are expected each week. That's despite more than 25,000 crossings this year alone. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper insists it's just a trial and won't confirm exact numbers, saying doing so could aid people smugglers. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says it will make no difference whatsoever.
Well, I just don't think this scheme is going to stop the crisis that we've got. We need to stop the boats. This feels like a scheme that's just having an exchange with France. One in, one out does not reduce numbers. It does not reduce the number of people who actually want to come to the UK. And 50 people a week, I mean, that means 94% of the people coming each week get to stay. That's not good enough.
In other news tonight, police in Warwickshire are denying claims they tried to cover up the rape of a 12-year-old girl in Nuneaton. That's after Reform UK Council leader George Finch said the public weren't told the full story and that both men charged were, he says, asylum seekers. But in a public letter, Chief Constable Alex Franklin-Smith has hit back, saying the force, quote, did not and will not cover up criminality and that their priority is supporting the victim. The men accused are due in court later this month and the Home Office is now being urged to clarify their immigration status. News next from the United States, and in a rare political move, Bill and Hillary Clinton have been subpoenaed in an ongoing probe into paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. It marks an escalation in the search for answers, with Ghislaine Maxwell already summoned and deposition set through to October. Donald Trump, once pictured with Epstein, has denied any prior knowledge and previously blocked the release of key files. The Justice Department now has until the 19th of this month to hand over the records or risk a constitutional showdown. Back here at home, systemic failures left the UK prison system days from collapse. That was the warning from a scathing new review by former Chief Inspector of Prisons, Dame Anne Owers. She found the service had been repeatedly pushed to the brink, with failures across planning, leadership and funding. The report also reveals the cost of building new prisons has almost doubled, now hitting more than £10 billion. It also paints a picture of a system under severe pressure, with warnings ignored and a crisis narrowly avoided. And in Scotland, pass rates have risen as pupils there have been receiving exam results. Students have found out their grades in nationals, highers and advanced highers. Official data shows there's been a slight improvement in grades on last year. And our reporter Tony Maguire has been speaking to some of the students.
I did really well. I managed to achieve 5 A's.
5 A's, wow. And yourself?
And I've managed to get 1 A advanced higher, 2 A's at higher and 2 B's another 2 B's at higher, but I already had an A at higher from last year, so.
Maybe stop showing off now. Yeah. I think, you know.
Yeah, we're both really happy. So we just wanted us to work hard. If we worked hard, we didn't care what grade we got.
Yeah, I got on really well. I got straight A's, so I'm happy. I'm chuffed.
And did you expect that?
No, not at all. Apps of maths, I was so scared that I walked out that exam and I was like, I think I've failed. And the fact that I got straight A's, I'm proud of myself and the hard work's paid off.
That's it from me for now. Someone else who I am almost certain got straight A's, if not A stars, is Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. 2 opinion polls last week revealed the truth about the nation's view of Brexit. The first, in the Sunday Times, remarkably revealed that 52% would vote to remain, which Remain is gleefully used to prove that the British public have a bad case of regret. However, it's fundamentally misleading. First, it's obviously impossible to remain in an organisation that you have left, and a referendum that asked people if they wanted to rejoin would have had very different connotations. The blob has never come to terms with Brexit and is desperate to tie Britain to a failing and bankrupt European Union that it always thought the electorate was stupid to vote to leave. However, I suggest that Remainers don't get too excited about the Sunday Times poll, because a new poll, which is being given exclusively tonight for its first outing to GBNews and bargate till 8 o'clock, conducted by Queen Mary University in YouGov, has just been released, and this one has got away from the predetermined views on Brexit by not actually mentioning the B word at all. It asks what powers people want the nation to have and which ones ought to be shared with international bodies. The poll gave respondents 3 options alongside Don't Know to 20 questions on decision-making. These were the UK government alone, the UK government involving other nations on a non-binding basis, and the UK government bound by international institutions. On every single question, the most popular answer was the UK government alone. And in 17 of the 20 questions, this answer, including the Don't Knows, had over 50% support. So that, for example, on VAT, 71% want the UK to make the rules exclusively, while only 5% want the government to be bound by international institutions. But remember, when we were still in the EU, VAT was made by the EU, not by us. The 3 that did not have over 50% support were AI regulation, data protection and trade rules, but still, a majority wanted us to do them. So despite the relentless Remainer whinging, the fundamentals of Brexit are as popular, if not more popular, than ever. The British people do want their parliament to be sovereign, despite the poor quality of government they're currently being provided with. This idea of taking back control was at the heart of the Brexit campaign. The decisions affecting the UK must be made by those who are democratically accountable to domestic voters. And it's wonderful, it's refreshing, it's uplifting that voters have confidence in their own nation, a positive position that looks to a bright future. The sadness is that our politicians are such pessimists, managers of decline. But when the politicians do not match the needs of a democratic people, new ones can and will replace them. As always, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm very pleased to be joined by the man behind the recent polling, the Professor of Politics at Queen Mary University, Dr. Richard Johnson. Richard, thank you very much for coming in.
Pleasure.
So let's start with this poll in the Sunday Times that said 52% of people wanted to remain, 29% now would vote to leave. Did that make you, as somebody who supported leaving the European Union, feel that we'd got it wrong?
Well, look, I think that even the most ardent Brexiteer has to admit that there have been a number of polls that have showed a degree of dissatisfaction with Brexit. The question is, what is the interpretation that we make of those findings? And I haven't been convinced that Leavers in Grimsby have suddenly been won over to the common fisheries policy, or Leave voters in Mansfield are sitting there thinking, you know what we really miss? It's the Erasmus scheme. So an alternative theory of this that I've always thought is maybe the reason why we're seeing Leave voters unhappy with Brexit is not that they have suddenly realised the error of their ways and that they were foolish and tricked by a slogan on the side of the bus, but actually because they voted for change, and that change hasn't been delivered because the UK Parliament hasn't actually made use of the powers that Brexit gave them.
And the results are pretty conclusive, that in almost every area, more than 50% want the UK government to make the decision. And I mentioned in the monologue, this included Don't Knows. In a lot of polls, Don't Knows are reallocated, aren't they? So this is a very straightforward, honest poll.
I have to be honest with you, Jacob, I was actually surprised by the results of this poll. I thought that there would be a crowding among the middle option, that the UK government should work voluntarily with other countries but not be bound by international institutions, for a couple of reasons. One is that when voters don't have strong views on a certain issue, they tend to huddle around the middle as the safe option. And the second is, this is a question that's asking people about, do you think the UK government alone should be able to do X, Y, and Z? And at the moment, the UK government, the current UK government, is quite unpopular. And so even though in the poll I said to respondents, putting aside your views of the current government, it's really difficult for people sometimes to do that unless they have a strong overriding view. So the fact that we were getting more than 50%, 2/3, in some cases 3/4, saying UK government alone, when the current UK government is polling at 20% in the polls, is really quite striking.
It's quite clear that people want British sovereignty, and they want it pretty much regardless of whether they voted Leave or Remain, Lib Dem or Green. I was interested, the Green voters, were in favour of self-determination in a majority of cases for 11 out of the 20 options. Was that a surprise to you?
Yes, I mean, I was not entirely surprised that I was expecting to see some cross-party agreement on the UK government having certain powers. But the extent of it, actually, the Greens were the least sovereigntist. When it came to Lib Dems, 16 out of the 20, the Lib Dems gave majority support for UK government alone. For Labour, it was 15 out of the 20, and of course for Reform and Conservatives, it was all or nearly all of them. So actually, what this shows, and what I think this should, instruct our political class, is that the lesson of Brexit is not necessarily that people are unhappy because we have moved too far away from the EU. But what people are looking for and expecting is for the government to actually make use of the powers outside of the EU.
But both the last Conservative government with the Windsor framework and this government with its reset are running off in precisely the opposite direction to hand more powers to Europe. And I see we may even be fined by the European Union if we don't follow their rules in relation to food standards.
That's right. And on food standards, for example, nearly 2/3 of our respondents said that they believe that the UK government alone should be responsible for setting food standards. And that's across political parties. That includes Labour voters, that includes Lib Dem voters, as well as Conservative and Reform voters. And so I think that what we have here, though, is a political class that basically are out of practice of exercising sovereignty. They are looking for someone else to tell them what to do when it comes to policy choices. And the reality is now that we're out of the EU, it's up to them, and the voters are expecting them to make those decisions.
But how do you square this political circle that surely politicians wanting to win votes should be looking at this and saying, well, actually, the reset is a very bad idea. What we want to be doing is being more nationalistic in our approach to policy, clearer that we will make decisions for ourselves, perhaps leading to the next stage of the argument, pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights?
Well, I certainly think that if we were to have another referendum, whether that was on ECHR or it was a rejoin referendum, as soon as you put the arguments to the voters that if we either remain in the ECHR or if we rejoin the EU, there are a certain set of policy decisions that will no longer be or will remain out of the full control of our government and our parliament, then I think you will see that the public will blush at that reality. I think what we've had at the moment is there's a sort of way of trying to the political class has tried to sell this as, well, it doesn't matter if we realign with the EU because we like the policies of the EU. And so if we like the policies of the EU, why does it matter if we bind ourselves into those policies? But actually, I think what voters across the political spectrum are saying is that they want the choice put to them.
And is this politically important for how the government takes the European argument, that if they see this polling, they will be much less likely, I would have thought, to try and get the United Kingdom back into the EU, and therefore at some future date, a government that wishes to use the freedoms will still have them. It'll be much harder to give them up on a permanent basis.
Yes, and I also think it's really important for the government to stop framing this around Brexit and the EU. I mean, as you mentioned in your monologue, one of the things that I wanted to do was to ask questions about sovereignty which didn't invite people to relitigate the Brexit vote, because people have become so tribal in their Remain or Leave identity. A lot of academic research has shown that overpowers even party identity. And so I thought, what I want to just ask people is, who do you think should be making the decision? And once you do that, you see that even Remain voters actually believe that it's the UK government in a large number of policy areas.
And the political consequences of it is interesting. I remember polling in the early 2000s that listed policies and asked people whether they thought it was good policy or bad policy. And they then listed the same policies and said, these are Conservative policies. And when they said these are Conservative policies, their popularity collapsed. Are you worried that the same would be true here? That actually, if you said these are benefits of Brexit, you would find that all the Remainers said, well, actually, we don't want to set our VAT rates after all. We'd like it to be done by Europe. So would you get a different picture? And if you would, which do you think most determines voting?
Look, I think that if I had set this poll as, do you think the UK or the EU should make these decisions, then what you would see is a bunching up based on the Brexit votes. But what I think in terms of campaigning, but also just in terms of sort of the politics around our constitution, is that if we actually get into the substantive discussion, so we have to move one step beyond the Brexit discussion, we have to move beyond the tribal politics of the Remain, Leave identities, then actually we see that we aren't as divided as a country as we may have felt during those Brexit years.
So there's a great deal of hope, and that this should be an incentive for the government to start doing things like perhaps taking VAT off domestic fuel prices, because they now can, and that will be popular and will have the support of people regardless of how they voted in Brexit.
That's right. And, you know, in this poll, some of the policies that were being polled were policies that had a more left-wing tinge to them as well. Policies asking about state aid and nationalisation and control over employment law. And even then, we saw Conservative and Reform voters say, we believe that the UK government should be in charge of setting that. Now, sometimes that might be a Conservative government that sets that more in their direction. But they have to concede that at the present time, that's a Labour government going in the opposite direction. Even in spite of that, they're happy for the UK government to make that choice.
And we'll be discussing VAT on school fees later, which we could only do because we've left the European Union. But very finally, this is basically the British people saying they like having their own sovereignty.
Yes, and I think this shows that actually we were always an awkward fit in the EU, because I think that this sort of instinctive sovereigntist line in the UK public runs very deep, and it runs across the political spectrum. It's not just a right-wing phenomenon. You see it very strongly on the left as well.
Richard, thank you very much for joining me. Well, shortly, as the government's new migration deal with France comes into force, is this the moment that the government finally stops the boats? Don't hold your breath.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What I want to talk about now, though, is a Christian street preacher who was shut down by London's Transport Police outside King's Cross Station. Now, she has exclusively spoken to GB News, claiming that Christians are being heavily persecuted in this country and that police are not doing this to other religious speakers. Shocking, indeed, if true. Well, are we living in this two-tier approach by the authorities that we hear so much about? I'm delighted to say I am joined now in the studio by that street preacher herself, Monique Bailey.
It is true that the police did tell us that you need a permit, so that is truth, but it's the way it was handled. She was it was just astonishing. I just couldn't believe how a police person could come against us like that. Like, we were abiding by the rules. And by the way, I didn't actually put the full clip on just to, in a way, save her, because it actually got worse.
OK.
Yeah.
Monique, can I just quickly ask, if you take a step back and look at Britain, you know, as a Christian, you see the demonstrations that we've had since October 7th, some would say pro-Hamas, anti-Israel demonstrations, pretty overt displays of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
We've had the Lucy Connolly case. We've had, I would argue, clear evidence of a two-tier approach within our judicial legal system. Do you think that we are actually now entering a society where some groups, some religions are treated much more harshly than others? Do you think, for example, if you had been a Muslim preacher in King's Cross Station, the reaction would have been the same?
Yeah, of course, every religion gets something thrown at them, but I do think, of course, Christianity is the most persecuted, and I do think we will see it more.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg. Well, the government's latest scheme to smash the gangs by returning small boat migrants to France comes into force tomorrow, but offers precious few details. This morning, the Home Secretary failed to provide any firm numbers, no timeline, and certainly no guarantees.
Taking place in August.
So, again, we need to work those processes through, but we want to see the returns themselves take place as swiftly as possible.
You can't
and
say
bear in mind, people will be detained until they are returned. So
but you're
they will
unable
remain
to say
in
August, Head
detention.
Secretary.
Well, as I said, we want this to be in a matter of weeks. Some of those cases we hope will be able to take place very quickly.
Reports suggest as few as 50 people a week could be returned, drop in the ocean or drop in the Channel, compared to the more than 800 arriving every week. That's less than a single boatload, though even that figure remains unconfirmed. Well, I'm joined now by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Laza. Matthew, let me come to you first. Yvette Cooper is a very capable politician. She's been around a long time. She must have known the questions she was going to be asked. Isn't it just a little bit amateur to go on with Nick Ferrari and not know when or how many or any of the details of this policy?
Well, I think one of the things they're trying to do is not announce too many of the details whilst the negotiations with the French are still going on as to the exact numbers. So, however, exposing yourself to scrutiny when you're not able to disclose things is always, as a former communications advisor, is always a tricky thing to do. So she may have been advised to have had an hour extra in bed and not done the morning round this morning. I think that this whole policy is dependent on the numbers. And at the moment, our understanding, as you say, it's going to start small. The government will be hoping it gets big pretty quickly because it's only going to have any impact if it does.
But even if it gets big, actually, isn't it a pretty bad policy? Because you're still going to have the same number of people coming in, and the British voters are fed up with mass migration.
Well, the idea is that you get the deterrent effect. So ultimately, you don't have the same numbers coming in because you have fewer people coming across the Channel, and therefore you're putting you put a lot of people. You have more people. You have the same number initially, and then if it kicks in, you have fewer over time.
But this is the same deterrent effect that Labour said didn't exist from Rwanda.
Yeah, but the argument against Rwanda, one of the arguments was you were never going to have sufficient volume of people going to Rwanda that it would be a deterrent effect. So Labour needs to be careful. If it's only sending 50 a week back, then it's clearly going to have, it's not going to have a deterrent. If it gets into the hundreds, which is many more than would ever have gone to Rwanda, then they would argue it might have the deterrent effect, but that's a big if.
Kelvin, there are lots of big ifs in this, but also on the numbers. I'm worried that the one who comes in will then say, well, I've got a family of 15, and some recent judge has said that family doesn't mean a blood relation. It can have a broader description in some cultures.
Correct. I mean, let's be honest about it. The judges are firmly on the side of the left of the Labour Party, and no matter who gets turned away, bizarrely, they'll be back again in front of some kind of clapped-out immigration judge who wants to make a name for themselves. And in number 10, you have a Prime Minister, actually, who has made his money, his career and his life out of being on the side of the people in the boat. He has never made one penny being on the side of the voter. How he ended up as Prime Minister is beyond me.
Well, he has, but an opinion poll that's just come out, I think, showed that over 40% of people want zero migration.
Correct.
They want to stop the whole thing.
Do you know what? When I read that, I said, you must have called me in my sleep. I am one of those. I have said it on this programme, and I would say it to anybody. We have to have a period of time when we don't take in anybody, legal or illegal. Anybody who travels around London must think to themselves, am I in a different country right now? Something really dramatic has happened over the last couple of years, and I just think we need a pause. We need a pause from politicians like Starmer. We need a pause from judges who don't seem to understand. Look, their problem is that they have a law in front of them and they enjoy deploying it. But we have a Prime Minister who won't do anything about that. And there is nothing we can do, and this is where I blame the Tories, right? The Tories were so awful that people voted for a party which they knew was going to do this to them, both financially and through migration. And it is a shocking moment, and it is the reason why anybody you meet is depressed about life. They're lumbered with this lot. They're lumbered with migration that can't change. It is a shocking moment for the country.
Matthew, the problem for Labour is that this has been announced too early. It goes with this feeling that the politicians don't really care about this. They've announced something that may or may not work. It just looks like a lot more spin when hundreds of thousands are still coming in illegally. We're not even counting the number who are overstaying on visas. And a lot of the country are with Kelvin, that we've got to have a pause simply to absorb the numbers who've come in over the last 5 to 10 years.
Well, as you say, a lot of people, that's the view of a lot of people. But before we even get there, we need to not have a doubling in the number of people coming in small boats. I mean, look, Labour's problem at the moment is it's not going to get a hearing from the British people until it is seen to have got serious on the boats. And frankly, that's the same for the Tories as well. But people think they gave the Tories a hearing, they gave them a chance, it didn't work, and that's why the Tories are languishing.
Can I ask you something, though, Matthew? You walk in the Labour world, which is, unfortunately, I have not been invited. Right, you walk in the Labour world. What do they say about this every night when they watch the boats coming in? And do they say to themselves, something must be done? Or do they say, I tell you what, put out that handout about one in, one out, and let's see how that goes?
I think that they think that it's an unacceptable situation and it's an unsustainable situation, not just for the country, but if they're being cynical politically as well.
For their careers.
Yeah, I mean, look, and you've seen people like Joe White, who's the MP for Bassett Law, who runs the Red Wall Group, say, who are outliers in terms of their public pronouncements on this. But I think a lot of Labour MPs' instincts, look at all those Labour MPs in Middle England constituencies with tiny majorities.
But isn't that quite a divide between them, who may represent a more old-fashioned traditional Labour view, and particularly the lawyers, particularly the Lord Hermers of this world, who want everything run by the European Court of Human Rights, who think that the Refugee Convention is holy writ, and therefore basically don't want to turn anyone away. I
think there is a big divide between those who say something must be done now and those who think something must be done but are not yet prepared to countenance the measures that would involve something being done.
And
that means effectively
that
breaking
is the heart of my criticism of today, that today is a pretence that something's going to be done, and I think is going to make voters even more annoyed when they discover that actually it's a handful of people, that we are still taking people in. The deterrent effect on this is much less than Rwanda, because there is still an opportunity to get in, so it gives you an incentive to get to France. And when the numbers haven't gone down much by Christmas, people will be saying, they've just been selling us a pup.
I think there's an issue for all parties who have promised a solution. The Tories promised a solution. They promised they'd stop the boats and didn't do it. Labour promised to smash the gangs, and they haven't. Let's face it, they haven't done it yet because nobody can claim otherwise when you've seen that when the figures of small boat arrivals. So the cynicism that is being bred by over-hyping any individual announcement is real, and I think that worries me because it leads to the discontent which Kelvin's talking about, which can have unfortunate consequences, to put it mildly. So we need, more action, fewer words, and things that are actually going to deliver.
Well, Matthew and Kelvin, thank you very much. Two titans of the socialist left are at war over allotments. The former Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has accused the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, of driving a nail in the coffin of community gardening after she approved the sale of 8 plots since the election. Jeremy Corbyn, ever the revolutionary horticulturalist, says the policy threatens the joy of digging for potatoes on a cold, wet February afternoon. Well, my panel is still with me to discuss this great question. I'll come to Kelvin first. Are you an allotment man?
I'm very much in favour of the allotments, and I'm very much in favour of Corbyn in his first sort of public announcement, coming out in such a liberal and friendly manner, the complete opposite of his persona. And it's a shocking mistake by Rayner. right? She presented him with this fantastic PR coup. Why did she have... First of all, they tried to do it around my way in Weybridge, and they were beaten off, right? And honestly, you go into any town, any village, the allotment is a prized centre for that village or town. People love it. And actually, it's a mistake. I do understand every time you need housing. Why on earth did she have to announce it? She's a conceited idiot.
Well, I, for once, am on the side of Jeremy Corbyn. I know what enormous pleasure allotments give to people, the reward from them. I know the excitement of my own garden of growing things. We had terrific raspberries this year, and those raspberries taste better than any other raspberries I ever eat.
I mean, look, Jacob, it may be even more of a surprise to find myself on the same side as Jeremy Corbyn, which is words I never thought would leave my mouth, because, he's not my sort of Labour politician, and indeed now an ex-Labour politician. So what has the Labour Party done? Given him an absolute own goal. As Kelvin says, you've got nice, cuddly Jeremy, who is genuinely an allotment user, allotment holder. Instead of talking about Gaza, he's talking about digging up potatoes on a wet February morning.
And this will be the effect. There will be a lot of this kind of stuff going on, and actually Corbyn is going to do very well, and that's what I love about this. It will destroy, or that with killing the Greens is just about going to destroy the Labour Party. It's going to be a fantastic defeat, much bigger than even the Tories in 24.
Instinctively, allotments, the working man improving himself, and it was men generally in the 19th century, is absolutely at the core of the labour and cooperative movement. And it's extraordinary that the government, of course, there are occasions when you have to build on the one or two particular allotment sites and hopefully relocate, etc. But to sort of say, allotments can go hang, when they are hardwired into the DNA of the Labour soul, they can bring tears to a Labour audience with, talking about the improvement of the working class, which is actually how things like the NHS started. Look, you could get me going on it for hours.
I think it's going on.
And it is such an own goal by Angela. I'm really upset about it.
Just a final thought: it's two of the best communicators in the Labour Party, one former, being against each other, and that's quite a problem for the left. Anyway, thank you to my panel. In a moment, as parents up and down the country feel a pinch from Labour's private school tax rate, including me, I'll be joined by a father whose children's school was forced out of business by these cuts.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Around eastern parts of the Mediterranean, we have some showery rain, which could be a little bit heavy at times. It's a drier picture further west, albeit some showery rain not too far from Madeira at the moment. Worth bearing in mind, temperatures across parts of Portugal and Spain, they're rising. We're going to get some heatwave conditions through the next couple of days, with temperatures peaking in the low 40s. But like I said, across parts of Greece into Turkey, here we do have some showery rain. Otherwise, the outlook is for things to be largely dry and sunny.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following a very unsettled, stormy start to the week, the winds over the next 24 hours will ease. It's going to be drier for most, with clear spells overnight and plenty of sunshine. During Wednesday, summer weather returns for the time being, with high pressure building back into the southwest. That's helping to kill off the showers into the evening. But there is an area of rain that's just going to affect the north of Scotland for some time, before becoming restricted to the far north as well as Shetland and Orkney. Elsewhere across the UK, clear spells, lighter winds. As a result, temperatures dipping into the single figures in sheltered spots. But plenty of sunshine first thing, certainly some decent sunny spells across the southern half of the UK. There will be a few mist patches for parts of southwest England first thing. They'll lift pretty quickly in the morning, and then blue skies for much of England and Wales, Northern Ireland likewise, southern Scotland through the central belt. Now for the north of Scotland, here we've got thicker cloud and some patchy light rain through the morning. But even this is tending to drift further north into Orkney and Shetland, and it will clear mainland Scotland during the morning. But the sunshine elsewhere prevails. There will be some build-up of cloud during the morning and into the afternoon. Initially just fair weather cloud across the south, and then thicker medium-level cloud coming into the west, turning the sunshine milky by the afternoon across Northern Ireland, West Wales and Cornwall. But where we've got the sunshine and the light winds elsewhere, it's going to feel very pleasant. Temperatures back up to 22 to 24 Celsius. Then into Thursday, a change in conditions once again as a weather front sinks some rain southeastwards across the UK. This tends to weaken as the day goes on, mostly dry towards the southeast. Friday, more changeable weather to the north with some wind and some showery rain, drier and warmer to the south.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record, you say that week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Labour's tax rate on private schools is already unravelling as wealthy parents use their accountants to outmanoeuvre the Treasury. Vindictively imposed in the middle of the school year, Labour's VAT policy has exposed the limits of class war economics. Parents at the UK's top schools have simply prepaid millions in fees to dodge the 20% charge before the tax kicked in. As a result, the government has lost up to £100 million that it had hoped to gain from this raid. The very families Labour hoped to target are unscathed, while smaller schools and the less wealthy parents are left to foot the bill. Well, I'm joined now by Ben Smithwell, who is at the sharp end of these tax rises. Ben, first of all, thank you for joining me. I would point out for my viewers that I have 6 children at private schools, so I was personally affected by this, people might have guessed, but I feel I ought to let them know. But I'm much more interested in your experience, Ben. What happened to your children and to the school that they were at?
Sure. First of all, thank you for covering this story. I think it's not getting a lot of airtime at the moment, a lot of media outlets, so we appreciate it. So we came back after the Christmas holiday. My children went to a very nice, small Catholic independent school. As soon as they got back after the holidays, first thing, the email landed day one, saying that sadly the school was going to have to close. So it was enormously disruptive, as you can imagine, very, very stressful. And we had to scrabble at quite short notice to try and figure out what to do next for the children. So I've got a 13-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy. Thankfully, we've managed to find them alternative schools. I would definitely say that not all of the children have been perhaps as fortunate as us. Due to the kind of school it was, there are quite a lot of kids there with various different SEND needs and disabilities, etc. A lot of those children have already been failed by the state sector. That's why they're in the private sector. So for some of them, it's definitely not been a happy ending so far. Some have been back to the state sector and have unfortunately bounced back out already. So their needs simply cannot be met. So it's been a very, very stressful period for lots of children, lots of parents as well.
And it has an effect even on those children who, because they have special educational needs, are paid for by the local authority, because if the school closes, then a new plan needs to be put in place, and that can sometimes take quite a lot of time.
No, absolutely. I think disruption is the name of the game here. It feels like this policy wasn't about redistribution, it was disruption. I think the timing of it, it's been said by a lot of people, it almost seems to be being calibrated to cause the largest amount of chaos possible. Obviously, it's the children who are paying the price there. And again, it is those children who have definitionally fallen between the cracks, who have various different needs, who are ending up the worst off of this deal. It's been very, very difficult for some of them.
And those facing exams, because by implementing it in the middle of the school year, you'd have had children at schools that have closed who were 6 months from their GCSEs or their A-levels, on which their whole future careers can depend, who suddenly found that they were getting no education.
100%. And again, the calculus seems to have been to cause that kind of disruption. I mean, I know lots and lots of children who are in that very, very position. And it's not just about changing schools, it's the friendship groups as well. particularly you think adolescent people, their peer groups are very, very fundamental to who they are and who they're going to become as young adults. So it's not just the exams, difficult though that is, it's the entirety of that change of social context. Very, very difficult indeed.
And the cost of it in terms of extra places in the public sector that have to be paid for, it's not actually going to raise very much money for the government to spend that it claimed it was going to spend on improving education elsewhere.
It appears so, and I'm not exactly surprised. I imagine neither are you. It's almost as if this wasn't really about what it was about in the first place. I mean, look at this thing on the face of it. It's not about taxing the rich. They can absorb it. It's just a few extra grand out of their pocket. They won't even notice it touch the side. You're not taxing the rich. You're penalising those people who definitely could only just about afford it. Those are the ones who are bouncing out into the state sector now. Education isn't a luxury, and neither should it be classed as such. And for many families, this is the one thing they scrimp and they save for above all else. It's the first thing they pay every month after the mortgage. It's the most important thing for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ben, thank you very much. Let me now get the thoughts of my panel, Kelvin Mackenzie and Matthew Lazo. Kelvin, this was just vicious class warfare, wasn't it?
Well, it was a mixture of that, and also they wanted some money, and 1.6 billion sounded rather attractive, so we can kill two birds with one stone. If we can get the money and we could shove it to the middle classes, which is really... Because, so a friend of mine, who isn't wealthy, by the way, he's just paid 5 years in advance in order to defeat this. And... he's not wealthy. I think he had to borrow half the money. He had half the money. He had to borrow another half. And the other aspect to it, of course, was that this was the way it was sold by the way, that woman Bridget Phillipson, right, who has never made a penny in her life, right, has never done any work, worked in a charity before she was made a young MP, and therefore she knows nothing about life, nothing about creating wealth. The first thing she says is that we're going to employ loads more teachers. Actually, none of that's happened. There are now less teachers employed. It wasn't quite a quid pro quo. And at the end of it all, why? Why do this? And why shut 50 schools down? Right, what was the point? A lot of them, I agree with one aspect of it, a lot of them are really like that, right? With that tax in exactly the same way, that tax on NI, a lot of companies are like that, boom. They love putting wealth to the sword, and that's why another reason it always happens like this. Every single Labour government there's ever been, the only people they're interested in is the dim and the skint, hoping that they pay their blinking benefits. It's a shocker.
Matthew, Tony Blair would never have done this, would he?
I think the truth of the matter is, I think he probably wouldn't have done it. I think the government should have done it in a slightly different way. I think there is a case for doing it. 93% of Britain's pupils go to state schools. We need to concentrate the nation's resources. It was effectively a tax break for the 7%, and there is entrenched privilege from those 7%. Weirdly, today, I was watching, even before I knew I was coming to the programme, I was watching a programme that I made with Andrew Neil called Posh and Posher, Why Public School Boys Run Britain, which we were both, which I produced the first time I met you. Absolutely. Somebody in my office insisted on watching it. And it just reminded me that, of how much when 9 old Etonians were ministers in the first coalition government in 2010, etc. It reminds you that we need to...
Do you think this cabinet is a good advert for the working classes then? Because honestly,
I'm not sure it's any worse than the 2010 cabinet.
Exactly. I would rather have the Etonians than, for instance, that woman from a comprehensive up in Sunderland who now tries to wreck. Well,
that's pretty elitist. Anyway, let's finish on that, and thank you very much to my panel, because a new study has suggested that honest home cooking, the sort of food Nanny makes, is the best way to shed the pounds. I'll be joined by the founder of Bags of Taste, Alicia Weston.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're
the failure is...
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A new study from the University College London has uncovered that how you cook your food holds greater sway over your waistline than ticking the nutritional boxes. It's been revealed that when you roll up your sleeves and make yourself an honest meal from scratch, it's possible to shed the pounds at twice the rate you would with a diet of processed food and snacks. A triumph for the saucepan over the sachet, if ever there were one. Anyway, I'm now joined by the founder of Bags of Taste, Alicia Weston. Alicia, first of all, tell me, what does Bags of Taste try to do? What's its aim?
We work with some of the people that have the biggest barriers to eating well, essentially, in society. So often people that have perhaps mental health problems, other kind of serious health problems, and some of them can't even leave their homes, really, to help them improve their diets.
And you help them improve their diet by teaching them to cook from the ground up, really, so with the ingredients, so they can then feed their families with their own cooking?
Well, that's a bit of a misconception, because actually 80% of the people we work with actually know how to cook and rate their cooking skills when they join us as average to good. So there is a misconception that people in poverty, I mean, there's no question that they do have, in general, poor diets, but the belief is that, people can't cook, so therefore they don't need home cooking. And in fact, the real barriers are much wider than that. Only about 20% of the people we work with really don't know how to cook, and it's about the same, rich or poor.
So, well, I'm one of those 20%. But
Yes.
So what are the barriers? What are the barriers you're trying to break down?
Well, a lot of it is about confidence, to be honest, because when you're hard up, you really have a lot of sort of bashes to your confidence. But there are lots of different things. For example, what you will eat, what your kids will eat, what your food preferences are. How many takeaways you walk past on your way home is a pretty good indicator of whether or not you're going to get home with a takeaway. Well, there's a lot of cost-related stuff, of course. So there's things like, do you live in a food desert? Can you actually get access to fresh food? Because if you're just surrounded by ultra-processed food, funnily enough, that's what you're going to eat. Do you have the right equipment? Does your oven work? Are you using it for storage? These are all things that predict whether or not you're actually likely to cook for yourself. And so it's really about breaking down these what we call social determinants of health.
And once people do cook for themselves, this new study seems to indicate that they will be better off, and if they wish to lose weight, they'll be better off losing weight on their own cooking rather than on the fast food that they've walked past on the way home.
So there's been this massive debate over the last probably 4 or 5 years about ultra-processed food, which is essentially food that it contains lots of ingredients that you wouldn't find in your own kitchen. So factory-made food that's been kind of mass-produced, but not things like tinned tomatoes, but things that have a lot of different ingredients, and how bad it is for you. And the research that's been coming out, as is this, shows that it's not very good for you, and it impacts things like your mental health, obviously your physical health. So all of these things are just, the evidence is getting stronger. And this study actually does show that the ultra-processed food is not as good for you as home cooking.
But does this mean that people can eat unlimited quantities of their home-cooked food, or should they still be reasonably sensible about what they eat at home?
Portion control is quite an important thing. And in fact, I mean, that's one of the things that we work on, is helping people to understand, for instance, how much pasta you should cook, because often people just sling in, they just guess with the pasta. They're not really sure. They end up with too much, and they think, well, rather than go to waste, I'll just eat it. So, if you have 1.5 portions, you're like, well, I don't know what to do with a half portion, I'll just eat it.
So what you're trying to do is give people confidence to do what is in their own best interests.
Absolutely.
And that this study confirms that for people who are looking to lose weight, but it's got much more benefit than that.
In terms of cooking?
In terms of people's general health?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Certainly the evidence around ultra-processed food shows that it gives you a 50% increased chance of depression, for example. So there are, and in fact, there's some, not this particular study, but another study that came out quite recently shows that your risk of death from all-cause mortality is directly related to the amount of ultra-processed food that you consume on a one-to-one basis.
All right, well, we've got some ultra-processed food in front of us, which is a Greggs sausage roll, which people may be able to see the camera, and some Kentucky Fried Chicken gravy to pour on it.
I heard this is their new product.
This is apparently a new deal. Now,
Jacob is not going to eat this.
I'm not actually, no, I'm afraid. If it were a Greggs chocolate eclair, I would eat it instantly. I kept going during the general election campaign on Greggs chocolate eclairs. But I'm afraid I prefer homemade sausage rolls to bought ones, and I'm afraid I also prefer homemade gravy. I've never been a fan of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I've got to dip the sausage. I'm getting instructions in my ear to dip the sausage. I was told I didn't have to eat this by my producers, and here it is, and I'm afraid I'm not going to.
I said I would eat it.
You're going to eat it?
I will eat it.
Has to be said, I know that Alicia is a brilliant cook, so that she is eating this thing is, I think, a service to the GBNews watching
I did try
public.
the vegan sausage roll just to see what it was like after all the hype. So.
And what's your expert opinion once you've taken a... Am I being a bit wet in not digging in?
It tastes like a sausage roll.
Tastes like a sausage roll? Well, there you are. What more could you possibly want? Perhaps I will take a bite after all when the programme safely ended and you don't see me dropping gravy all down my shirt front. Anyway, that is all from me. Thank you very much to Alicia from Bags of Taste. Up next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, what is on your menu this evening?
I can't help but feel as though, Jacob, if we'd told you that was a miniature beef Wellington, you'd have eaten that in seconds. But anyway, right, so look, loads coming up. So Yvette Cooper can't say how many people are going to be deported under this new one-in, one-out scheme, or when the scheme will start. What are they trying to hide? Talking of things that I think they're hiding, I think there's a big cover-up going on when it comes to asylum seeker sex offences. It's going to reveal that. And you might have noticed that Yvette Cooper did not come on GB News today. We're not on the morning round tomorrow, which Lisa Nandy is on. We weren't on the morning round yesterday. I've got a full list for you of Labour cabinet ministers who, it seems, are refusing to talk to GB News. It's not really about us, is it? It's about the viewers. Do they really not care about the viewers of the #1 news channel? After your weather.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following a very unsettled, stormy start to the week, the winds over the next 24 hours will ease. It's going to be drier for most with clear spells overnight and plenty of sunshine. During Wednesday, summer weather returns for the time being, with high pressure building back into the southwest. That's helping to kill off the showers into the evening. But there is an area of rain that's just going to affect the north of Scotland for some time, before becoming restricted to the far north as well as Shetland and Orkney. Elsewhere across the UK, clear spells, lighter winds. As a result, temperatures